Hey, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host. Great show in store for you. Thank you so much for joining us. Whether you shoot an over and under or side-by-side pump or semi-automatic, we're going to have some advice for you on shopping for shotguns from some of the experts at Pacific Sporting Arms. Looking forward to learning a lot more about buying new and used guns both, and all the things that are associated with that. So if you're in the market, and I know about half of you are, so pay attention. And actually, if you're thinking of selling a gun, maybe I'll dig into that a little bit as well. We're here in the Cabela's podcast studio, so among other things, we'll be covering that, plus our Handle It segment, how feeding your dog before a hunt will affect his performance. In our public access walk-in segment, This Land is Your Land, a road trip routine for your dog based on some of the many things I've learned over the years, and especially in the last few weeks, doing a lot of travel with my dog Flick. And then finally, two more. Our reader poll. When you're not hunting, what is your highest priority? I'll have some insights for you on that, and then hunting reports from you. So stick around for all of that and who knows what else. So hope your season's going well over here. It's pouring rain, not to take anything away from all the folks who are suffering through hurricanes and really bad weather, but we've got our own share of it right here, and got out of it just in time on the Chucker Hills. So now that it's pouring, torrential, I can get caught up on a whole bunch of other stuff, but I'll bet you'll hear some of that rain pounding on the tin roof here at the Cabela's podcast studio in the meanwhile. Well, learned something new about how important, I guess not new, but how important, I guess the degree of newness, how important water is to Western birds. Been hunting a lot. Probably hunted 1/3 of all the days of the season so far. And all the usual hiding spaces and good habitat has been bone dry. No birds. But we found them all near water. In fact, my best guess estimate would be that every single bird we saw was within 500 yards of some sort of moisture. Whether it's a stream, a lake, a pond, a cattle tank, just a seep or a spring, damp ground with low spots in it, all of those are the places where we found western birds. Huns, chukars, valley quail. Getting the same kind of reports from other folks on other species as well. If you're in the West, we've been pretty darn dry, well, until a few days ago. Some of you, some of the other folks out there, though, are not having similar challenges. In fact, if you look at the Monday morning debrief on the Facebook page, the Wing Shooting USA Facebook page, lots of great things going on. Jerry Courtney says they had a great weekend, did a youth hunt, and took these two boys for their first birds ever. They're all camoed up. Looks like two ugly dogs there and a couple big Canada geese. Congratulations, Jerry, not only on the success, but taking kids on a youth hunt, period, is a success, so keep up the good work. John Salvesberg, good to hear from you, John. It's been a while. Got a 1.5-year-old short hair, it looks like, and he figured out how to pick up a bird and got the taste, and then it was game on. Oh, and you're welcome, by the way. He gets some of his tips from right here, probably from some of the guests. Good dog, good owner. Way to go. Levi Shank, you hunted with your dad. Can there be anything better than that? No, there cannot. Keep it up. I'll tell you, you're lucky to have one to hunt with. And finally, Tony Arneson, carrying on our Fur Feathers Friends tradition. Good job, Tony. Guided 7 active military. Woo! That's kind of like herding cats, but it looks like he had a good day, and everybody lived to tell about it. So, as you say, Tony, awesome, and God bless America. Keep up the good work. Way to go, Tony. I'm so glad to hear from you all. If you're not pitching in, telling us, bragging, showing off your dogs, what you shot at, all the friendships and the camaraderie you're getting. Well, just mosey on over to the Wing Shooting USA Facebook page any Monday morning and kick in your 2 cents worth. It's always fun to share, and this way it gets shared just one more time. All right, the Upland Nation podcast is brought to you in part by Sage and Breaker Gun Care products, crafted at the highest caliber. I mentioned the dry weather and what it does to guns, and then I also got wet the weekend before. But this time around, we did get caught up in snow the last day of our last chucker hunt down there in southeast Oregon. By the way, that was a great camaraderie experience as well. I'll bore you with that someday. But in the meanwhile, Sage and Breaker's CLP came in real handy after I got snowed on for half a day. Dried it off, of course, and then I sprayed CLP all over that gun and protected it very well. And not only because it cleans, it lubricates, it protects, all sorts of other great things, including kind of a anti-static component in there, chemical component of one sort or another. So take a look at CLP, among other things, at sageandbreaker.com. And was reminded again by all of the fans of the Dog Energy Bar down there in the trailer after a social hour was well underway. DogEnergyBar.com is one of those products that I liked so much I became a distributor. You want to learn more about it and why fat is the way to fuel your dog during the hunt, go to DogEnergyBar.com. For you, for me, it's easy. Red Bull, coffee, simple carbohydrates. Those are all the things that fuel us during the day. But so much talk online these days about dogs, kind of losing all of their oomph in the middle of a hunt. Dog Energy Bar and the 59% fat in that Dog Energy Bar should help you do the job.
I am ready when you are.
Well, that's a good cue right there. That's John Fournier. He's the general manager of Pacific Sporting Arms East. There is a West as well. That one's in Azusa, California. Pacific Sporting Arms East is at pacificsportingarms.com, as well as Walled Lake, Michigan. John, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. Where the heck is Walled Lake, Michigan?
Walled Lake, and first of all, thank you for having me. Walled Lake, Michigan is a suburb of Detroit, and it's about halfway the distance between Detroit and Lansing. So we're about 35 miles northwest of the city of Detroit.
And so I would imagine you get a little business from both of those, but a lot of your business is online. You have a very extensive website. Tell me, what is your organization's kind of stock in trade? Describe what you guys do.
Well, our business is a bit of a niche business, but the bulk of it is servicing and selling shotguns that are very high level. And they are for clay target shooting for the most part and field hunting, as well as some higher end rifles and that type of thing. But typically the bulk of it is for the clay target enthusiasts.
Well, about half of my listeners, when they're not chasing birds of one sort or another or trying to keep up with their dogs, are clay target shooters. So there's the relevance there, as well as the fact that a lot of those folks are still, a lot of us are still looking for that, like that gun of a lifetime, if you will. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple moments. But first, let's get some of the formalities out of the way. John Fournier, Pacific Sporting Arms East. To you, is it sporting clays, skeet, or trap?
What do I prefer?
Yes.
I have been and still am an avid skeet shooter. I started shooting back in high school, and like a lot of clay target shooters, they get started as a youngster, and then life gets in the way, and you go to college and have a family. And then I didn't really pick shooting back up until my mid-30s, and then at that point, I had the means to actually start competition, which actually led me into the business. So avid skeet shooter. I don't really shoot the other disciplines too much other than recreation.
Well, we're going to get along just great because I get asked the question every couple of weeks, if I'm going to be a bird hunter, what am I going to, practice on? And I keep coming back to skeet as the most realistic simulation of most bird-oriented shooting situations. Have you found the same to be true for yourself?
If we were speaking back prior to 1990, I would agree with you because the history of the game of skeet was to mimic some of the game animals that were being hunted at the time. But sporting clays has really erupted onto the scene, which is actually mimicking a lot of different sporting animals. So I would say in today's day and age, sporting clays has actually replaced skeet to get people a little bit more ready for the field work.
I won't argue that with you, but I'll never shoot a bounding rabbit, and there are other targets like that. And I tell a lot of people the same thing. If you all you are is a bird hunter, skip those presentations, the ones that are wacky to you, or if you want to really refine your technique, sure, some of those are good. What do you find the most challenging target when you're shooting sporting clays?
That's hard to say because everybody's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And there's such a variety on what the target presentations are today. And the game has evolved also, by the way.
Yeah.
When sporting clays first came out, targets were closer. They're pushing targets further away, making them more difficult because, quite frankly, shooters have gotten a lot better at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's hard to say. I don't think I could say which one would be hardest. Maybe falling targets for some folks, but that really depends on the individual.
If you were to give us a little bit of advice, and I used to make a television show about sporting clays and skeet and all of that, and I would ask every shooter I met the same question: what is the one bit of advice for getting better at clay target games that you would give us?
Well, I would say that there's three things that you need to do to hit a moving target. It doesn't matter if it's a sporting clays, skeet, trap target, a game bird, okay?
Mm-hmm.
First, you have to have your eye on the target, not the end of the barrel. That sounds simple, but matching gun speed and target speed can only be acquired by watching the target, not the end of the gun. The second principle is that you're going to keep your head anchored to the gun in the same anchor spot throughout the target presentation. That creates the gun shooting where you're looking. And the third principle would be how much lead you would have in front of it, which is required depending on the distance of the target and how fast it is. But it's the least important of the three because we're shooting a shotgun and we just have to get close. So if I were to tell a new shooter, what do I work on? Boy, keep your eye on the target no matter what, and stay focused and your cheek on the gun well through the presentation, and then you will acquire the lead aspect of it and you'll be more successful.
You make it sound so simple. I remember
it is very simple for complicated people.
Yeah, I guess so. You're absolutely right, and I'm still working on the lead thing. I learned to shoot from somebody who taught instinctive style, and that works great on those 25-yard targets. But if they're crossing it all or something like that, then the whole lead thing is. And I understand there's various ways to do that and to insert the gun at a certain point and all of that. Mm-hmm. If you could describe lead to a non-participant in a way that might make sense to them, how would you describe that?
Well, I'll relate it to if you were a quarterback throwing a football at a wide receiver that was running sideways, you wouldn't look at your hand. And through doing it over and over again, you know to insert ahead so that the receiver runs into the shot. Same thing, same principle goes with clay target shooting. It takes a lot of repetition so your mind imprints what that shot gap looks like. And that just is with trial and error. Once you start hitting targets, your mind is actually going to imprint what that sight picture looks like. Because when we're shooting a clay target, we don't want to be thinking of anything other than watching the target and keeping your head on the gun. The natural instinct will put you in the right spot. But at the beginning, we don't know where we're at, so that takes some time to create those imprints in your head where you look at the target, your mind knows where to go with it, and you put the barrel in front of it, and you're successful. So it's difficult at the beginning, but as you do it over and over again, your mind actually subconsciously is creating the lead that you need.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
That's easy to say for you. I love it. When you were, yeah, I'm presuming you still shoot a little competitively here and there, but when you were doing it, a lot, what was the biggest challenge to being a competitor? You ask the same, I could ask the same question of a baseball player or a track star. What is the biggest challenge in going from pretty good to excellent?
The biggest hurdle most clay target shooters have that are very talented and they're semi-successful and then getting to the next level is, number one, shooting a lot of tournaments, but also creating a mental game that allows you to repeat under pressure. And most people, if you talk to them about clay target shooting, they'll tell you that the gun, or that the process is 80% mental at some point. It's not a physical thing that allows us to be successful, but yet most people practice most of their time on the physical aspect of the game and not the mental aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So the really, really good shooters have a better mind. They shoot practice like they do in competition. That's easier said than done when somebody's standing there with a score sheet. But truly, the top shooters in all the disciplines and your Olympic shooters, they are process-driven. They concentrate and practice the process of doing well. And that's really the only difference.
Well, that's a big one. And it sounds like you get to that level employing some elements of what we'll loosely call sports psychology. I don't know.
Exactly what it is.
Visualization and all the focusing that you can do with those things. Do you see any transference from that to, say, a upland or a waterfowl shooting situation?
I think the field hunters do that anyway.
Yeah.
It's more instinctive because there's the unknown. You may be walking or pointing, and you're not worried about, am I going to hit or miss the target, and how am I going to stack up against my buddies when they count everything at the end of the day? You just don't have that philosophy. You're out there having fun. Most people hunting also don't count hits and misses. A good day is just a good day in the field. But boy, you get somebody in a competition aspect of it, like clay target shooting, all of a sudden now the element of, what are people going to think about me if I shoot poorly? How do I stack up against my buddies? All of that mental aspect comes into that type of game. But it's wonderful. I mean, the clay target industry has exploded the last few years with all the youth programs. And quite frankly, a lot of game reserves are closing down, so people are shooting more clay targets because it's readily available to them.
Yeah, there's the affordability in there as well. You want to go out for a good day of hunting, and it's going to cost you a lot more in the long run than, a couple rounds of sporting, for that matter. You're listening to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host. That is John Fournier. He's the general manager at Pacific Sporting Arms East. They also have a West Azusa, Well, I remember when Azusa was just a butt of every joke from Southern California. I was down there, so I can admit to it. John, your principal business is selling people firearms, and I'd like you to take me to school on that. Granted, we can go down to any store or any website and buy a gun, but there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. If you were to take me under your wing and help me buy a high quality gun that hopefully will become an heirloom. What's the process? And then take me down that road a little bit.
Well, first of all, there is an ocean of quality clay target and field shotguns available today of all different makes and manufacturers. We carry about 17 different brands that go all the way from base model guns that may be in the 2000 range up to over $150,000. Each individual has to make a decision, number one, and most importantly, what are we going to do with the shotgun? What purpose does it serve? Because if you're looking for a field gun that's lightweight and you're carrying it in the field, that's going to be a different type option than if you go to a heavier clay target gun. Although they both shoot a shotgun shell and could probably work, we want to make sure, number one, what are we going to do with the firearm? Then gun fit and gun balance is very, very important as well. That's why there's different manufacturers that make their guns differently and feel differently, because we're all different in what we like in the feel and comfort of the gun itself. So there's no one right or wrong way to do that. We're all different in that regard. And of course, budget does come into play. There's just certain things that a higher end gun is going to do for you that one of the base models does not. Durability, function, precision, all the things that come into what separates what we call a competition grade gun from a manufactured, maybe automated gun. There's a difference there. Some people will never tell that difference based on how often they shoot. But as an individual, you have to decide, again, number one, what are we going to do with it? Because we want to pick the right gauge, the right package, the right weight, the right barrel length. Then we get into the different brands and how they feel. And then we have to also look into what the budget's going to be, because quite frankly, there's a lot from the bottom to the top.
Yeah.
And in between.
Let's put those all aside for a moment and help us avoid what I'll term the fatal flaws in our gun shopping process. What do we do wrong? Yeah, I mean, you deal with these people all day, every day, and you probably roll your eyes when you're on the phone with a guy like me, because I might ask the dumb questions. I might not ask the right question. What are our biggest shopping mistakes?
Well, I think the first thing is people tend to be extremely impulsive. So they read, they their buddies shoot, they get impulsive. I got to have the next thing, and they end up making a impulsive purchase. Now, one might think as a gun dealer, boy, that's great for our business. But truly, at Pacific Sporting Arms, we want the individual to get the perfect gun for them, because we don't want buyer's remorse, so we don't want them to struggle with the particular gun that they pick, because that's going to create an issue with them down the road where they don't like what they have.
Mm-hmm.
So taking the time, if you can, to either demo the gun that you're looking at. Our locations have gun clubs close by where we can actually do consultation while you put your hands on it and shoot it.
Mm-hmm.
That's important. Some folks can't do that, though. I understand there's parts of the country where there's just nowhere close by that we can do that. If that's the case, then you have to rely on some of the brands that have a better reputation as a starting point. The World Wide Web is wonderful. It's also really terrible in a lot of aspects. Some of the chat rooms, I swear people have nothing better to do than complain about things, and there's a lot of misinformation out there on specific issues with specific guns. And I suspect that's true with a lot of different things.
Television shows.
Yeah, could be.
Everybody's a producer.
So I would say that the first thing would be great if we can put our hands on them and test drive them or shoot them. That is really where the rubber meets the road. Obviously, if your friends have items that you're looking at, or particular guns that you're looking at, and you can try theirs, same thing. But we want to make sure that the gun is, when the customer buys it, they are 100% confident in the choice. Because the more confident you are with what you picked, the better attitude you're going to have and the more successful you're going to be.
What about gun fit? I mean, whether they're in your store on the range with you standing next to them or they're buying it off of your website, what can you do as a dealer to ensure that, as you said, all the things fall into place? One of them being gun fit. What should we do? What can you do to help us?
Well, that's a great question because, in my opinion, gun fit is probably the most important function with the purchase. An ill-fitting gun, I don't care what price it is, it's a bad decision. So how do we do that? It's not easy if you are shopping at a particular location that doesn't have qualified staff. We are very fortunate. In both our locations, we have qualified staff that do hundreds of gun fittings a year. We fit every gun that we sell. Now that means that they have to be present for us to do that properly.
Yeah.
But there is another solution for folks that can't come in and they shop online. Is many of the guns today have adjustable combs that are easily movable so that when you mount the gun, the rear sight, which is your eye, is directly over the rib, not only in elevation but also in what I would call windage or east and west. It's very important when you lock down on the comb that rear sight, which is your eye, is directly over the rib. If it isn't, then the gun doesn't shoot where you're looking at. So a movable comb, whether you need it when you start or not, we all gain weight or lose weight sometimes, and that might need to be altered. So that's a really good suggestion. Most manufacturers make their stocks that fit about 90% of human beings. They've done this research, they know what the dimensions are, and with small tweaks, usually we can get those to fit just perfect. But you have to start with going to somebody that knows what they're doing. There's not only gun stores that have that capability, but also there's instructors that can help you with that too.
Well, the big one with me, because I've gone back and forth being cross-dominant, I've actually tried to shoot left-handed for a couple summers. Don't ask me more because I'll never try it again. But but the whole idea of cast off or the bend in the stock being, how critical is that? I mean, if you sight down a lot of gun stocks that you buy off the shelf, there may be just a little bit, but I don't know. Is that still a thing?
Sure. So most manufacturers today, here's another good thing about the industry. Many, many years ago, they made most stocks that were fairly ambidextrous, fairly straight, dual palm swells, maybe a little bit of cast on or cast off if you're right or left-handed, but most of the manufacturers just tried to get one gun to fit everybody. Nowadays, most manufacturers offer true right and left-handed stocks. That has really been great. Also, female lines, which are not like in the old days where you just lopped off the end of a stock for length of pull. They actually, females need a different dimension in general to make them fit as far as the grip size and the comb height. But yes, cast on and cast off is very important because it puts the butt stock in the proper position in the shoulder and allows your eye to continue to be over the rib, and it really affects recoil as much as where the gun's shooting. So it's important.
Settle the bet. All right, so everybody walks into their local gun store, big box retailer. First thing they do when they get it is they put the butt of the shotgun in there, the crook of their elbow, and then they put their finger into the trigger guard. And if it, quote, fits, unquote, then they will shoulder it after that. Does that old wives' tale, if you will, of putting that gun in your elbow's crook really work? Is that
it does not, for one reason. I mean, that basically is going to show you what your elbow angle will be when you mount the gun. That's part of it. But I know people that can take a 17-inch length of pull and crawl all the way to the end of the stock and really length of pull is 2 dimensions. It's from the trigger also to the end of the buttstock. That basically puts your head or your cheek on the comb in a certain position.
Mm-hmm.
But also, what about the distance from the trigger shoe to the grip? That's another dimension that is important, because if your hand is not on the palm swell with your finger extended to the trigger where it's comfortable, you have to change your wrist angle to make contact, which is the case with people with small hands and females, which is why closed grips or closer grips to the trigger is important, and why they have their own set of dimensions for those types of people. It's not as complicated as it sounds. I generally can fit somebody in less than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Been doing it a long time.
Yes.
But length of pull, comb height, and trigger length is really the basics.
And he knows of what he speaks. Yeah, that's
Pardon
John. I'm just promoting you again, John. John Fournier with Pacific Sporting Arms East, general manager, gun fitter, knows his stuff inside and out. John, you get a moment to catch your breath and wonder what the heck you did and committed to here, while I make a couple brief commercial mentions, and then we'll be right back with all sorts of stuff, including a look at some used guns and our Handle It segment. So stick around, everybody. It's the Upland Nation Podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host. And now, quickly, I have learned yet again why I love Dr. Tim's Performance Dog Food so much. Learn more at drtims.com, but digging in for a whole bunch of reasons to ingredients, for example, and how they affect my dog's performance. You know, Flick, already in 25 days of a season, he's already hunted 10 of them, and he's put on over 200 miles, and he's still going strong. Every day he's scratching at the RV door ready to go again, and part of that is because he's been eating Dr. Tim's, and the Dr. Tim's ingredients are so high quality. You can chase them all down, find out where they're sourced. They're all from this side of the Pacific and Atlantic. They're not they're not coming from other places. Plus, Dr. Tim's will give you 30% off your first order. Just use the code Upland Nation at drtims.com. And yes, I do wear them in the field, espamerica.com. You'll learn all about ESP, electronic shooters protection, electronic earplugs. I heard the chuckers way up there, and then those little muttering valley quail down at the bottom. I could hear them really well, thanks to those ESP electronic earplugs. 30-day money-back trial, so if you're kind of anxious about how they all work and whether you'll be comfortable in them, have Jack Homa make you up a pair and try them for yourself. You get fitted locally, and the custom fitting is critical there. That's why they don't fall out in the field. Go to the dealer locator page, type in your address, and find somebody nearby who can do that fitting for you in the comfort and privacy of their professional office instead of on a stool behind the counter at a sportsman's show, if we're ever allowed to go to sportsman's shows again. All right, I learned something every day from my bird dog. Flicky, if you're listening, thank you for your hard work. You're doing a great job so far. I mentioned Dr. Tim's and how critical dog food is. In our Handle It segment this week, I'm going to tell you not to feed him before a hunt for a whole bunch of reasons. I'm just going to touch on a couple right now. The first is all of the energy that is devoted by a dog's body to digesting and carrying that food if you feed him in the morning. You know what it's like if you have a big breakfast and then you really got to work hard. I don't mean walking through a flat pheasant field, but I mean climbing some hills or doing some serious brush busting in the upper Midwest for rough grouse. You don't function well on a full belly, neither does your dog. Let me give you one analogy. All right, take a sock, hopefully a clean sock. Take all your car keys, drop them in the sock. Hold each end of the sock. That's your dog's GI tract. That bunch of keys is the food you just gave him. It's already settled in the heel. Jiggle it up and down, go back and forth, and what happens? Well, there's the risk of that stomach twist. Try it long enough and you might have that as, one of the outcomes. Instead, your dog's not going to starve. He'll do fine until the evening. Hydrate him well, then feed him as much as he'll eat at the end of the hunt, and keep your dog safe and functioning at full capacity. And with that, welcome back, John Fournier, Pacific Sporting Arms East. When did you move out west as well, or is it the other way around?
It's actually the other way around. Our company started 21 years ago in L.A. The owner, John Herkowitz, was originally a native of Michigan, and after high school had moved to the Los Angeles area with his family. He was a police officer on the L.A. Police Department and an avid shooter. And after he retired, and became a very accomplished shooter, by the way, after he retired, he decided to start a shotgun business, which started very small and slowly but surely added one brand after another, to the point where we have become the largest, probably high-end gun dealer in the world at this point. He always wanted to come back to Michigan at some point because he liked the area, and the opportunity arose to open a second location here on we call it the East Coast, but so that's about 6 years ago, 5 to 6 years ago that he did that. So now he spends time in both places. We actually are getting ready to open a showroom and a pro shop in Nashville, Tennessee. So we are expanding with the market. So very successful. We've been very blessed.
Well, good on you. I remember way back when you just had the West Coast store. I think that's when I met John first, many years ago at a SHOT Show, probably. But maybe Safari Club, for all I know. But anyway, someday we'll be able to go to those all again. In the meanwhile, let's shift our discussion a little bit. I'm buying a gun. Okay, it might be a new gun, it might be a used gun, but for now, in the used gun world, and you see a lot of these, what is the biggest problem we will run into? What's the biggest functionality issue that a used gun might have, and how do we recognize it?
Okay, so I'm going to start with probably the most important part of the purchase is actually also the same as a new gun, is you want to make sure, if you can, you buy it from a reputable source.
Yeah.
In today's day and age with the World Wide Web, we're all used to shopping online, and I do a lot of online business. We couldn't do what we do without it. But there's a lot of private owners that are selling their own pre-owned guns on a couple of the larger sites, which for the most part are very successful and there's no problems. However, there are some horror stories about purchases, fraudulent purchases going through some of these sites and people getting really hurt that way. So you have to be careful who you're buying it from. You have to make sure there's a concrete return policy, inspection policy. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're looking at pictures. We don't know until we get it what it's truly going to be. Hopefully everybody's honest and upfront, but that's not always the case. So that would be number one.
All
Very
right.
important.
So we got, we're confident, whether it's some guy down the street, neighbor, brother, whatever it is there a mechanical issue that would convince us to run away as fast as possible, as opposed to taking a chance on it and maybe being able to repair it?
Well, that's hard to do online too.
Yeah.
But overall condition obviously drives the value of any purchase. Whether the gun has been altered, is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the stock's been cut would be an example of that. If the barrel has been altered or molested in some way where it's been backbored or the choke's changed or whatever, those are all things that really drive the pricing or the condition of the gun. The bluing, you can pretty much tell from the overall condition of the gun if somebody was abusive or had a tendency not to take care of what they have. There's a lot of handling marks on the stock, a lot of rust or bluing. You pretty much know that it has not been taken care of, and don't be surprised if there's something wrong mechanically.
Mm-hmm.
But again, going back to having a good inspection policy, if you're buying a pre-owned gun, well, you might want to be able to go shoot it during that inspection policy to make sure there's function.
Sure. Is there something that is, and I jump immediately to a Damascus barrel, but are there other truly dangerous conditions that we can recognize as just a layperson when this thing shows up in a box on our porch?
Well, that's difficult when you're not an expert or have
Mm-hmm.
some kind of knowledge of head spacing, possibly. One big thing I always check first is whether there's fractures in the stock. Being able to inspect around the pistol grip and the tang if there's any kind of fracture there. Depending on what type of firearm, if it's an over and under, you can tell by the operating lever on the top if it's been worn in, maybe needing service.
And
Hopefully, the description of the gun will dictate what you should expect as far as any type of additional work you might need to do with it once it arrives.
that lever you spoke of, and I know what you mean. We all know what that lever is on the top, but the acceptable means it still has a bit of an angle to it, if you will. Isn't that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's correct.
So if it's flush, if it's in unison with the gun barrel straight back, it's probably pretty worn. Am I guessing right on that?
Yeah, if the operating lever is right in the middle of the tang or the safety, for most of the brands, then that locking bolt needs work, which can be done in most cases. Those are items, especially in your higher end guns, is very, very common and a replaceable part to get the gun back into factory spec. But you need to be able to determine that so that you're not overpaying for something you may need to put some money into.
Yeah. Any other red flags like that, warning signs that are very clear to us?
Well, it's difficult to look down the barrel, but if you look down the barrels, you could tell if possibly there was any bulging done.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, if you look at the condition of the stock and the bluing and the rib, you can pretty much tell if somebody's taking care of the gun. And most guns, again, are not shot anywhere near what the life of the gun would be because they're just really well anymore, especially if it's a reputable company that has a longevity attached to the model.
Sure.
Let's face it, there are over and unders out in the marketplace today. They're $500 or $600. Okay.
Yeah.
Those guns are not going to hold up like a gun that's 2,000 or 4 or 10. So you have to factor that in.
In the gun world, you do get what you pay for, you're saying.
That is correct. You bet.
Gosh, you are talking about things that all of us ultimately are going to run into at some point when we're shopping for a gun, and they're all useful. What if we're at a gun show and we just kind of, we're trying to be pretty skeptical, pretty cynical about the guy on the other side of the table? Are there any dirty tricks that we ought to watch out for?
No, I think the general, and I'm not a gun show connoisseur. I don't go to gun shows, although I go to shows where I set up.
Mm-hmm.
I think by and large, most people are pretty honest. The sporting industry and the shooting industry, most people are pretty honest. That doesn't mean that you can't buy something incorrectly that the person selling it wasn't aware of. Okay,
Mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm.
again, that's the risk that you run when you buy anything from a what I would call non-reputable or non-professional
Right.
source. It's going to happen. Some of your viewers are going to have every good intention, and they're going to deal with somebody who's totally honest, and they end up with a bad situation just because they don't do this for a living every day of the week. Our reputation is on the line with every sale we have. So we have to have a good service. We have to have good quality pre-owned guns and we sell a lot of them. There's a lot of trades that come in, so we have to inspect them. We have to be prepared what to do if there is an issue with the gun down the road. So those are all things that you may pay a little more for at a boutique type dealership as opposed to going to a big box store, but that's really what separates us from the other competition.
You're listening to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, the host. That's John Fournier with Pacific Sporting Arms, the Eastern Division. I can't wait to come visit you guys in Music City. You have a location yet?
It's really not public yet, but it's going to be probably in the first quarter of the next year. Yep.
Nice. Get as close to Broadway as you can get.
You bet.
All right. So we've talked around it a whole lot, but let's just talk about this whole warranty question. And it comes up all the time. You know, a lot of people I talk with are buying those $500 and $600 and $700 new guns, and some of them come with fairly impressive warranties, at least on paper. What is a reasonable warranty length for a good, high-quality shotgun? And then what happens after the warranty runs out?
Well, every manufacturer has their own warranty length.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We have some that are as high as 10 years, some around 3 on average. Generally 3 years, 1 to 3 years is kind of the average.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind that these warranties are only covering manufacturer defects. They're not going to cover if you break a firing pin, a normal wear and tear, a stock that cracks. That comes up a lot in our business where actually it's hard to get any kind of warranty on wood.
Really?
That's correct.
Wow.
So you have to number one, take care of what you have. That's going to go back to something we are very diligent about when people purchase from us, is that we go over maintenance, how you treat it, how you store it, how you lubricate it. All these things add to the gun's longevity, and also not having abnormal wear and tear. You would be shocked how many people think, because they buy an expensive gun, that you don't have to clean it anymore. or you can put any kind of ammunition through it. That would be like getting a ZR1 Corvette and adding oil to it, never changing it, and then just putting whatever gasoline in it that you want. Okay?
Yeah.
So you have to read the owner's manual when you purchase the gun, who you're purchasing it from. Make sure they go over the maintenance, how you maintain it. A lot of our guns, we recommend after about 25, 30,000 shells, it goes back to the manufacturer for an inspection, having it cleaned, having the springs changed. And those are the highest expensive grade guns,
Yeah.
but that still holds true. So don't think because you spend a lot of money on a particular firearm that all of a sudden you don't have to take care of it, because you do.
Well, let's get to that, because, you know, most of the time I'm carrying guns that I don't feel bad about if I fall off a cliff while carrying them. But inexpensive, top of the line, somewhere in between. What are some of those storage and care mistakes that most of us fall for? And it could be as simple as, I just put it right back into the truck. I put it into the case after a snowy day in the field. And I know you're probably cringing at that, but what are some of the more common storage and care issues that you guys have to deal with?
Well, the most common is people throw them in their gun case and put them in under the bed, and they don't wipe them down, and then
Mm-hmm.
they open them up the next time and they're rusted.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, climate controlled environment without humidity is kind of what you want. I don't like storing anything in a case. If the case gets damp, we had a customer actually just a couple of weeks ago had a very expensive shotgun in a case that was in the basement, and there was a small leak
Oh boy.
from his basement. And when he opened it up, boy, he had $1,000 bill on getting it reblued.
Yeah.
So maintenance is really important. Storing the gun in a clean condition, putting oil on it so that it doesn't corrode, not storing it in a case if you can get away with it, dry, obviously. Those are all really common sense procedures.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, help me feel better about the inside a little bit. Two things. First is bore, and second is, the whole, I'll call it the trigger assembly and all of that. The lock and the stock, all those things in there. First off, if I'm on a hunt and it's a beautiful day and I shoot 3 shots all day, and in my case, I miss 3 times, do I really need to clean that bore before I go out the next day and do the same thing?
Most likely not.
Yeah.
Gunpowders today are a lot cleaner than they used to be also. Um, there's some cleaning rods today that you can, implement a lot easier and quicker to just swab the bore real quick if you're a fanatic about keeping your gun clean. If it's long-term storage, I like to get it clean and actually put oil in the barrel to keep from corrosion. Not all barrels are chrome lined.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if we're going on the hunt the next day, no. Now, if you hunt it in a downpour,
Sure.
we may want to take the gun out of the stock and let the stock dry, depending on how bad the weather is.
Depending on how bad your mechanical skills are too.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's get to that, to the innards a little bit, because when I'm shooting a double gun of any shape and size, you flip that lever and you look inside. There's all sorts of moving parts, even right there, and you call them, the various things. I just love the term chopper lump. But that ought to be a name of a band. But beyond that, that stuff in there, without taking the gun apart yet, but with just that stuff in there, should we lube that? Should we keep it dry and clean? What's the story on that?
My philosophy, this isn't original, that's what I've been taught, is galling is expensive and oil and grease is cheap. So whether it's a side-by-side or an over and under, there are certain parts where metal on metal is making contact that you should have light grease. That doesn't mean you have to cake it on, but clean grease on a clean action every time you go out is important. That means you do not add grease to dirty grease, by the way.
Yeah, good point. I was behind that squad once in a sporting clays tournament, but that's another story. And you've twice now have said grease, not oil, in there. Why is that?
Well, oil, it dissipates too much. Oil is good for putting in your chambers on semi-automatics, but on an over and under or side-by-side, you need a little thicker grease on the areas, and each manufacturer has different contact points, so you have to use common sense. Where you see metal on metal rubbing, that's where you need grease. Okay.
Great rule.
A little thicker grease is always going to be a little bit better. You can over grease, so you don't want to go crazy, but it's just going to create a little bit longevity and not have that contact where it's dry on dry.
And finally, and today I'm reminded of it because it is freaking pouring out there right now. And my last day on my last hunt, it was almost this bad. So I had a wet gun when I got back, and I know I'm a big boy. I understand. I can see all those parts and I can dry them. But like you said, there are innards that may or may not be okay after a damp or even wet day, or let alone somebody uses one as a boat paddle or something like that. What can we as schmoes with the wrong set of tools do in that case?
Well, the first thing is don't hunt in the rain.
Right, like that's going to happen.
Well, look, compressed air is the best thing to get if you take the gun out of the stock and you want to let it dry. Sometimes drying it overnight will work, sometimes it doesn't, but compressed air is always good. Light oil on a rag, wiped onto those contact points, the springs, is not going to hurt anything. We don't want to douse it because that can create dirt and everything sticking to it.
Sure.
So you want to be careful. But really getting it dry is the most important thing so it doesn't rust.
So
or the stock swell, which can cause cracking.
Good point. And when it swells and it's still attached to metal, is that when that issue comes up? Is it a question of physics?
Well, sure. You can, as wood swells, you can crack the stock.
Yeah.
So depending if the wood, some manufacturers don't seal the stock on the inside where it's making contact with the receiver.
Yeah.
So one thing you can do when you buy a gun is if you take the stock off, you can get True Oil or Birchwood's Casey's True Oil and seal that inside, just putting it on your finger and letting it dry.
That might have been the best advice you gave during this whole podcast, John, and I know that's a big, tall order, but that is brilliant. So we should all be checking that stuff.
Sure, even the forend a lot of times is unfinished and unsealed, especially on your less expensive guns. So you can always take that True Oil on a finger and put it on, let it dry, so that'll help seal it. But then again, if it's pouring, you should take the gun out of the stock and let it dry, and then, you know, a light lubricating oil on a rag, wiping down the innards is always a good idea.
You know, you hear the old wives' tale all the time about storing your gun upside down in the safe or wherever you store it, so that all the oil from the action and the receiver doesn't seep down into that point where it hits the wood, and then soften that wood. Does that really happen?
I think if you're worried about that, you're putting way too much oil on it.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's a lot of oil.
Yeah, I bet it is. Well, on that note, I'm going to let you get off to actually playing with guns again. That's John Fournier.
Actually, I'm going deer hunting in about 2 hours.
Oh, well, be safe. Good luck. And I can't wait to hear how that works for you. And in the meanwhile, John Fournier with Pacific Sporting Arms. He's with the Eastern office in Walled Lake, Michigan. They also have a location in Azusa. And soon in Music City, if I have to live in a city, it'll be Nashville. PacificSportingArms.com. You learn all about them there. John, you've opened my eyes in so many ways. Thanks so much for being a part of the Upland Nation podcast.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show, and everybody have a safe hunting season. If you need any information on any of the main brands, you can call any of our staff at either location. We'd be glad to help you.
Thanks so much. Have a great hunt.
Great. Thank you.
But don't you go away, because we've got a lot more to cover right here on the Upland Nation podcast. First up, our reader poll. You know, if you're not getting in on it, then you probably ought to subscribe to the Upland Nation Insights weekly newsletter. I call it Weekend Essentials. Hopefully there's something in there for you that will help you become a better bird dog owner, hunter, and shooter. And the reader poll is sponsored by Happy Jack Dog Care Remedies, happyjackinc.com. Everything from skin and coat, parasites, fleas, and ticks, pad care, it's all at happyjackinc.com. So, you know, I'm always curious about, you know, what other people do when they're not hunting. So I thought that would be a good poll question. And sure enough, it was a bit of an eye-opener in that, you know, I could see some of this stuff and other parts of it I can't. Very small sample, but the biggest free time activity for you bird hunters, dog training. Duh. Clay target shooting, right up there in the, you know, the top three. Fishing. Good for you. If I'm not out chasing a dog or training one, I'm fishing too. Very few of you are taking advantage of the hunt test trials, dog games, bird dog challenge, that sort of thing, about 4%. Only about 6.5% of you do any waterfowl hunting, and a little bit of everything else, a smattering of volunteering, reading, fitness. Hopefully we're all doing a little bit of that. But anyway, you can sign up for the newsletter and all the information in there. For example, in this week's newsletter, some tips on taking advantage of getting our money's worth, for example, in the public access, private ground, open to hunting stuff. So if you're looking for other ways to, expand your horizons literally, it's in the Upland Nation Insights electronic newsletter. Comes every week, usually on a Friday morning. Sign up at findbirdhuntingspots.com. Take the next poll, which is probably going to be a little bit contentious. What's a finished dog? I'll give you about 6 different choices there for how you define one, and I'm really interested in what you're going to say as of next week, and of course I'll summarize it right here. The Upland Nation podcast is brought to you in part by Gunner.com. Yeah, Gunner Kennels, yes, but mainly Gunner these days, because they have so many other things to talk about, from crate fans to tie-down straps, kennel pads of all sorts, all weather kits, and personalized nameplates. All right, Flick, I'll get you one. Just quit bugging me about it. Oh, yeah, and they also make the highest quality kennels in the entire known world. Double-walled, roto-molded construction. Watch some of the videos. Look at some of the still images. It is mind-boggling that dogs and their owners survived some of those wrecks. If you value your dog, well, then get the best value in dog crates. Learn more at gunner.com. Try the vehicle fit guide and then crowdsource your own size right there at gunner.com. And I mentioned it once, and I'll mention it again because I got the question twice this morning on Facebook. My dog is just pooping out. He's just thrashed by the middle of the morning hunt. And yes, there are always important medical questions to answer, but if it's not that, it's probably your poor dog is not getting enough fuel. Go to dogenergybar.com, learn why I think fat is the dog's version of Red Bull. And I mean that in the best way. It's got the right stuff in it to fuel a dog's immediate metabolic needs. Dogenergybar.com. Learn more about that. And, if you go there, I'll be glad to share my thoughts in a white paper I wrote about how and why to feed your dog what at the right time. So get that as well. Just ask for it in an email and I'll send it to you. So thank you for your consideration on that. And in the meanwhile, speaking of dogs, which we do as much as possible here, as you well know, This Land is Your Land is where we talk about all the ways to take advantage of the places we can go, whether we own them outright as citizens of the United States or we have access to them through our license dollars, surcharges, conservation programs, and wonderful organizations that make access to private land available to us. This time around, I thought I'd talk about road trips and, related. You're going out to one of those new walk-in areas 2 states away. Let's talk about dogs. Dogs love routine. It's especially important when you're on the road because it ensures they're relaxed, rested, happy, and eager to hunt for you the next day once you get there. Here's some of the things that are really important if you can at all do them, and with a little work you can. First thing I like to do is try to keep my dog on his bedtime schedule. So if he's going to sleep generally at 10 p.m., even if you're still driving, put him in the crate and kind of keep it dark back there. Especially in the morning, he wants to wake up at the same time. There are many reasons for that. You know about all of them. So get up at the same time or earlier if you're already ready to hunt. So keep those waking and bedtime hours as regular as you can. Whenever I'm on the road, I find safe places to do a few little training drills if I can, because there are so many times when a dog, well, yeah, it's not that he forgets this stuff, but it's not that he also is not reminded of them enough. Training drills do two things. The first thing they do is they keep the dog a little bit mentally sharp. Second off, it gives both of you a chance to do a little, leg stretching beyond just walking around on a lead. So find a safe place to do it and take your dog out for a few drills. Bring food and water from home if you can at all possibly do it. And remember that the familiar crate that he sleeps in at home is probably the best place for him to sleep on the road. Routine for him and for you ensures a happy, safe, healthy, relaxed, and raring to go bird dog. The Upland Nation podcast is brought to you in part by espamerica.com. Learn more about their electronic earplugs and why I love them so much at espamerica.com. Wrapping up yet another edition of the Upland Nation podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something. Thank you, John Fournier of Pacific Sporting Arms, for all of your insights and wisdom. If you'd like to talk, I'm doing it every day at the Wing Shooting USA and the Upland Nation Facebook pages. If you'd like to visit us and learn more about public access, it's at findbirdhuntingspots.com. Please subscribe, rate, or review wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate that. It does help. Thank you, Freckles Smith, JREFIUDDC, and J. Domus for your recent 5-star reviews. Appreciate all of that. I also appreciate your kind attention. Here's your quote for the week from George Eliot. We long for an affection altogether ignorant of our faults. Heaven has accorded this to us in the uncritical canine attachment. Amen to that. I hope your season continues to go well. Stay in touch. Thanks for listening.